Quite often, when the leftists talk about labor, improving labor power, etc., immediate retort is that, oh, you don't care about innovations because that's the strength of capitalism. It gives you dynamic innovations, and you then cite Schumpeter, creative destruction, etc. But when Facebook acquires WhatsApp and Instagram, that's not creative destruction. I call it muscular entrenchment. And if somebody reads Schumpeter carefully, let me mention this, and I call it evolution in Schumpeter's thinking. So let me pause for a minute and talk about Schumpeter. So Joseph Schumpeter, when he was in Austria, in 1911, published a book, I still have a copy of that book, called The Theory of Economic Development. In that book, he talked about creative destruction. He said, this is the major source of dynamism of capitalism. New firms come and challenge the incumbent firm and defeat, quite often, not always, quite often defeat them, and that's how capitalism provides progress. This is in 1911, Schumpeter, 2011, where he first used that expression, creative destruction. Move 30 years from then, another of Schumpeter's classic work titled Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy. Date of publication, he was at that time teaching at Harvard, I think it's 1942. Schumpeter has changed. He no longer believes capitalism does this, that new firms come up and challenge the incumbent firm and leads to innovations. By the time he's realized, and being in the United States, he's probably seen many such cases, quite often the incumbent firms gobbles up the potential rivals. Not always. I'm not suggesting this is the only thing that happens, but quite often they do. And Schumpeter revised his view